A man waited in line for nearly 45 minutes only to be refused service once he reached the front of the line. He was confused. Why did the waitress refuse to serve him? He left feeling completely exasperated by the ordeal. Then, he decided to go back. This is what happened next. But before we start, make sure to subscribe if you haven't and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The line for the restaurant was very long, and as Carl stood and waited, his hunger continued to grow. By the time he reached the front of the line and it was finally his turn, he was already starving. He didn't realize that he would face a situation that would significantly delay his mealtime. Once he finally reached the front of the line, Carl greeted the cashier politely and started to get ready to make his order. However, she did not respond to him kindly. Carl thought that perhaps she wasn't having such a good day, and he continued to be friendly towards her. When Carl finally told her what he'd like to order, he was surprised to hear that the dish he wanted to order was not available. Even though he was disappointed, he decided to opt for another meal instead. When he gave her his order, she said that none of the options were available. Carl immediately became both confused and frustrated. When Carl tried to understand what was going on, the waitress simply rolled her eyes at him. He tried to tell her off, but she told him that he had to leave immediately. Despite the waitress insisting that he had to leave, Carl stood his ground and demanded to speak to the woman's manager. The manager showed up and told Carl that he was holding up the rest of the line. Carl was slowly starting to realize why the restaurant workers were acting the way they were towards him. He tried to explain to the manager what had happened, but her reaction caught him off guard. While Carl was trying to explain the situation, a cook came out from the back towards the register in order to inform the manager of something. When speaking to the manager, the cook pointed at Carl and said that he should be removed from the restaurant and that she was not willing to serve him. The manager laughed in response. Carl was frustrated by the fact that nobody was listening to him and that the manager was not taking his complaint seriously. At this point, Carl felt that he had had enough. He was not going to be nice and polite anymore. His next move surprised everyone there. The manager looked at him coldly and arrogantly told him that she did not have to explain herself to anyone and that he had to leave the establishment immediately. Carl was acutely aware of the fact that the manager or restaurant workers had no idea who he was or how influential he could be. He realized that walking around without his uniform would show him how people truly respond to him. He felt mistreated and upset, so he decided to take note of the situation and do something about it. He started to look around for witnesses who saw what had happened when he tried to order his meal. When he noticed that everyone around him was staring at him, he felt quite embarrassed. He didn't understand why the establishment had had the audacity to mistreat him like this. At that point, Carl knew that there was really nothing left to be said anymore, and he decided to leave the establishment. He was angry, hurt, sad, and humiliated by the whole ordeal. That's when he hatched his plan. The next morning, Carl put on his uniform. Although he had many things that he needed to tend to, he also knew that confronting the people who had mistreated him the day before was also a main priority for him. After a call out, Carl decided it was time to go by the restaurant once again. After he pulled his cruiser into the parking lot and stepped out, everyone in the establishment was immediately aware of his presence. He got out of the car and walked in. Immediately, all of the staff members greeted Carl politely, even the waitress who had been so rude the day before. When she started to realize who he was, her smile began to fade and was replaced by a horrified look. It was finally time for Carl to face the rude manager. He asked the cashier to call for her manager again. He patiently waited for her to make her appearance. He felt in control of the situation, standing with one hand on his hip and another holding onto his radio. Carl's story of his mistreatment at the restaurant went completely viral. A representative from the restaurant did not even try to deny what happened. She said that everything Carl said was absolutely true. After the restaurant's representative learned about what had happened to Carl, it was clear that something had to be done to rectify the situation. What would the consequences be for his mistreatment? What would the restaurant do? The public's response was heavily in Carl's favor. One person said that Hirsch should have sued the restaurant for $150,000, which was the amount a gay couple was awarded by an Oregon bakery that refused to make them a wedding cake. The people in charge of the situation at the restaurant tried to reach out to Carl but were not able to speak to him as of now. Regardless, the restaurant promised to look into exactly what happened and to make the appropriate next steps to help rectify the situation. Many people who heard this story were absolutely outraged. They were furious to hear about how the restaurant had treated Carl and believed that it could be considered a breach of customer rights. It seemed like everyone was on Carl's side, and they agreed that Carl had been a victim of discrimination. Carl's response was that he was never a fan of cancel culture. Additionally, he said he absolutely doesn't condone or support any criminal activity in response to what had happened to him. He also was against boycotting the establishment and felt that taking the high road was the best course of action. Facing a huge amount of criticism from the public, the restaurant decided to make an official announcement. The statement said that the staff's opinions and actions were absolutely inexcusable and did not reflect the restaurant's beliefs. The announcement also shared that the 2 employees involved in the situation had acted in an inexcusable manner and were terminated from their positions. The main issue was the fact that the restaurant was only concerned about what happened when they realized that a police officer had been mistreated. Without his uniform, Carl was treated horribly and without any respect. It begs the question, what would have happened if a regular citizen had faced this kind of discrimination? Would the situation have been rectified in the same way? If he was a non-police officer and just a regular black man, would he have faced a similar situation? Carl was able to use his power as an officer to rectify the situation and make sure the restaurant faced consequences for discriminating against a customer. The fact of the matter, this kind of behavior will not go away quickly, so it's important to show that there are consequences. Of course, police officers deserve respect, however, so do ordinary citizens who are not in positions of authority. Treating Carl poorly because he seemed like just another person was absolutely not okay. There's still a long way to go for society to eradicate discrimination. Hopefully, with time and with more sympathy and consideration, we can reach a point where discrimination is eliminated altogether, or at least reduced to a much smaller problem than what it is today.